This year has been a phenomenal one for the horror genre. Sinners, Weapons, Nosferatu, and Final Destination Bloodlines, to name a few outstanding ones. With such crazy momentum, we believe that this could very well be a revival of horror into the mainstream, with the hope that it will revitalize the genre completely and introduce new viewers to some classic horror stories of old as well. And we're here to ensure exactly that, which is why we have prepared a whole list of such movies that we can't wait to bring to you. So here it is, 22 ghost stories from the 1960s that are begging for a rewatch. Without any further ado, let's jump right into it. Here we go. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Innocents, 1961. The Innocents, by Jack Clayton, is one of the most sophisticated ghost stories ever. It's an adaptation of a novella by Henry James titled The Turn of the Screw, and the film is considered a masterpiece in using ambiguity on a psychological level. The plot follows Miss Giddens, a governess, who comes to believe the two children in her care are being haunted by the vicious spirits of their former caretakers. But the genius of the film lies in a particularly central and unanswered question, which sums up the entire point of the movie. And it goes like this. Are the ghosts real, or are they nothing more than a manifestation of the governess's own psychological breakdown as a probable result of her repressed sexuality and morals? But what makes The Innocents a film to rewatch is totally credited to the very ambiguity mentioned earlier. With each viewing, you can notice new details that support a different theory. Additionally, Deborah Kerr's performance is a masterclass in fragile sanity. And even the filmmaking itself is a key player in the overall narrative. Cinematographer Freddie Francis used deep focus and lighting in such an apt way that it helped create a world where suspicions of malevolent entities looming in any shadow or reflection could be felt frequently. The children in the movie, Miles and Flora, did a tremendous job in portraying unsettling patterns of behavior that could have been out of getting possessed, or even exposed to adult secrets and sexuality. Ultimately, it is this brilliant ambiguity that makes The Innocents such an excellent work of psychological horror, a haunting puzzle that remains as chilling and visually striking today as it was upon its release. Carnival of Souls, 1962. Carnival of Souls, directed by Herc Harvey, is a fascinating mix of horror and existential dread that becomes more unsettling as the movie progresses. The film was made on a shoestring budget with a largely amateur cast, but that didn't hold the makers back in any way from achieving a hauntingly eerie effect that bigger productions could only dream of. The story follows Mary Henry, who miraculously survives a car accident only to find herself haunted by a pale, grinning ghoul that ends up bringing her to a deserted carnival pavilion. The core of the film presents the psyche of Mary in such a disturbed way that it looks like she might be experiencing serious psychological issues as a result of her trauma, while feeling trapped in a limbo between life and death. Candice Hilligoss delivers a chilling performance with her portrayal of the troubled Mary. Rewatching the movie would bring in a new channel of discourse on the concept of alienation in modern society, especially when you consider the obvious signs of this in cases like Mary's inability to connect with other people, her lack of emotional response to music despite being a church organist, and her attraction to the decaying carnival. Now, the film works as a straightforward ghost story, as well as a sharp social criticism in showing how an individual can become spiritually dead while still physically alive. With a dreamlike vision of Harvey, who also played the haunting ghoul, Carnival of Souls is a fascinating experience, especially one that deserves a rewatch. The Haunting, 1963. Talk about a masterclass in psychological horror that paved the way for the popular trope of the most terrifying ghost being a haunted house itself. We talk about none other than The Haunting, directed by Robert Wise. It's based on the groundbreaking Shirley Jackson novel, as the story follows a team of paranormal investigators as they explore the infamous Hill House, which is said to have had a violent history. This film truly cracked the code in finding the right moments to rely on for experiencing horror, as it depended on the intersection of a character's vulnerable mind and the oppressive environment they're in. Our already psychologically fragile protagonist, Eleanor Vance, arrives at Hill House after years of caring for her invalid mother. But shockingly, this house just ends up providing a malevolent architecture for her existing fears to manifest. Now, in terms of filmmaking, Robert Wise and cinematographer Davis Bolton used a warped lens to produce disorienting visuals. The set design by Elliot Scott is a horror character in itself, featuring doors that swing shut on their own and hallways that seem to bend at impossible angles. But we never see a clear ghost, despite a presence that is felt in every creak and shadow. And believe me, the Hill House will make you feel it the next time you decide to watch The Haunting. Black Sabbath, 1963. This 1963 movie, directed by the legendary Mario Bava and titled Black Sabbath, stands as a landmark achievement in the horror anthology format, making it seamless to weave three strong tales into one compelling feature film. Now, Black Sabbath is elegantly held together by the legendary Boris Karloff, who's the host presenting the three films, along with starring in one of them called The Word Lock, and his commanding presence elevates the film as well as his presentation. Other than this, the other two segments are also strong enough to stand on their own. The Telephone is a slick, intense proto-slasher story about a woman terrorized by phone calls from a man she once betrayed. But considered the best of the bunch is The Drop of Water, which is considered a masterclass in slow burn dread, as the story follows a nurse who steals a ring from the dead body of an elderly medium and, as a result, gets haunted by the sound of a single, continuous dripping water as well as the corpse's terrifying face. Thanks to the breadth of style Bava has mastered, Black Sabbath acts as just one of the few examples to be mentioned later on that offers something for every type of horror fan, and remains a stunning blueprint for how to make an anthology work. Matango, 1963. This next film is from the great Ishiro Honda, best known for directing the original Godzilla, so you know you can expect something crazy. And that's exactly what comes with the 1963 film Matango, a Japanese cult classic that swaps giant monsters for a much more psychological layer of terror. The story goes like this. A group of wealthy shipwrecked survivors find themselves stranded on a mysterious fog-shrouded island. With their initial social tensions quickly devolving into primal survivalism, they discover the island's only food source is these strange wild mushrooms they call Matango. This is where the horror begins. The starving survivors succumb to their hunger and consume those mushrooms, but it is exactly that which causes their slow, eerie transformation into grotesque fungal humanoids. Now, in today's world, Matango suggests a disturbing allegory for addiction and the eventual loss of self as a side effect of it. The transformation in the film is portrayed like a complete erosion of humanity, and props to Honda for masterfully building such claustrophobic and eerie atmosphere by using the isolated island setting and an ominous music score to create this feeling of inescapable dread. Even with a rather small cast, the film shows each character representing a different facet of society while crumbling under pressure. The final mutated forms of these characters are unnerving to look at, and the film's ending also delivers a powerful anti-drug message that was far ahead of its time, but one that would still be a relevant story today. Kwaidan, 1964. Kwaidan, directed by Masaki Kobayashi, is a one-of-a-kind film that uses psychological dread along with masterful sound design to create a seriously haunting experience for the viewers. This critically acclaimed anthology film has 4 adaptations of classic Japanese ghost stories from Lafcadio Hearn, and from the first frame, it is very clear that this is unlike any other horror film. Kobayashi deliberately uses theatrically stylized sets and lighting, which create a world that feels like a living, elegant painting. The color palettes are bold and symbolic, with the backdrops clearly artificial, but it's this artistic choice that pulls you into a folklore-like world, where the supernatural feels inevitable. The film completely overlooks the usage of the same old jump scares in favor of creating a persistently atmospheric horror. This method is boosted with the amazing sound design of the film that relies on unsettling silences, a disorienting score, and noises from the surroundings that get under your skin. Talking about the stories, they explore the shuffle between the material and spiritual worlds, and mainly deal with themes like broken promises, artistic obsession, and the inescapability of a haunted past. Kwaidan won the special jury prizes at Cannes, which placed the film on a prestigious pedestal, along with being a one-of-a-kind cinematic achievement waiting to be rewatched. It's also a film that offers a valuable lesson in how to use older artistic forms to create something truly modern and terrifying. Castle of Blood, 1964. One of the most iconic names from the era that saw the renaissance of Italian Gothic horror, Castle of Blood is a remarkable ghost story that was shot in just 15 days. Something you would never guess about it after watching the finished product. The plot is a fascinating macabre setup that goes like this. In a shadowy London pub, a cynical journalist named Alan Foster interviews the legendary Edgar Allan Poe himself. Now Foster, skeptical of the supernatural, ends up still accepting a bet to spend the night of All Hallows Eve in the haunted castle of Lord Blackwood. But there's a catch. This is where the horror kicks in, as the story moves into a more dreamlike journey through the castle as Foster encounters its peculiar residents, one among them being the beautiful and tragic Elizabeth, played by none other than the queen of Gothic horror, Barbara Steele. But Castle of Blood can truly be considered a masterpiece, simply for its genius usage of black and white cinematography in providing such a shadowy and eerie feel to the film. Even the sets help produce a gothic atmosphere, along with the musical score, which furthers the sense of dread and melancholy. By the end, Foster becomes an active participant in the tragic drama faced by the ghosts in there, and ends up getting trapped in a romantic quadrangle that blurs the boundary between life and death, something that also leaves the viewers in an existential dilemma of their own. The Ghost, 1963. The Ghost, by Riccardo Frecca, is a prime example of the moody, atmosphere-centric Italian Gothic horror that flourished in the 1960s. And this movie particularly stands out as thanks to a powerful performance from the genre's queen, Barbara Steele. The Ghost is a psychological horror that blends gothic mystery with a supernatural twist. While the plot mainly involves themes like betrayal, murder, and a potentially vengeful spirit haunting a spooky old mansion, at the very core of the film is its ability to maintain a super intense atmosphere. This film keeps you guessing and questioning the true nature of what is about to scare you, whether they are genuine supernatural events or just some kind of planned out human conspiracy. Now, Barbara Steele is, as always, captivating, as she brings a stunning complexity to her dual role. Along with that, the film's cinematography makes excellent use of its creepy setting, with the shadows and overly decorated rooms contributing to the prevailing dread. The narrative keeps the viewers on edge, along with the protagonist, as they unravel the dark secrets of the household. Its ending is what is considered its biggest strength, which is something similar to the classic French thriller Les Diaboliques. All in all, The Ghost is a must-watch for fans of classic, slow-burning horror. Nightmare, 1964. From the legendary Hammerfall Productions comes the 1964 horror movie Nightmare. This one's a rather lesser-known gem that often gets overshadowed by the studio's other and more successful projects like Dracula and the Frankenstein series. But that does not make Nightmare any inferior in its quality. The film is a twisty psychological thriller, as we follow Janet, a wealthy teenager who is released from a mental institution after suffering from extreme nightmares that often involved a scarred, menacing woman. She returns to the care of her guardian, only to find the terrifying visions persisting and rather intensifying, and that ends up making her question her sanity and the motives of those around her. Directed by Freddie Francis and written by Hammer regular Jimmy Sangster, Nightmare unfolds and executes its narrative in a way that reminds most of a Hitchcockian thriller. The black and white cinematography is stylish and ends up creating a claustrophobic world, but the film truly excels in gaslighting, as Janet becomes entangled in a plot driven by greed and insanity, which forces the viewer to tag alongside a protagonist and piece together the puzzle alongside her. So for those who hope to get into the classic Hammer films, Nightmare is definitely a great one to have as one of your starters, in spite of getting unfairly overlooked. The Curse of the Crying Woman, 1963. This Mexican horror classic can be considered as one of the best cinematic interpretations of the legendary La Llorona, or rather, the Crying Woman folklore. Director Rafael Baladon brilliantly places the myth into a familiar gothic horror structure, which is much reminiscent of Universal's classic monster movies. The film is about a young woman named Amelia and her husband Jaime as they visit his mysterious aunt Selma in her remote, eerie mansion. But they soon discover that Selma is actually a witch who intends to use Amelia in a ritual to resurrect the ancient, powerful crying woman. Now, the film excels in emphasizing the supernatural elements of the tale, Rita Macedo is excellent as the Sinister Aunt Selma and commands the screen with her malevolent presence, while Rosita Arenas as Amelia provides a compelling battle in the story, as well as with her performance. However, the real standout is the amazing design of the crying woman and the film's exceptional special effects. Along with that, we are treated with haunted mirrors, deteriorating almost dead bodies, and a layer of creepy gothic decay in general. But this film's attempt to take a well-known folktale and elevate it with a solid story, compelling performances, and a spooky aesthetic overall has cemented The Curse of the Crying Woman as a renowned horror classic from Mexico's golden age of horror. Dead Eyes of London, 1961. For those in the mood to watch a horror film with stylish, pulpy fun, teed up with a creepy feel to it, then look no further than the German creamy film titled Dead Eyes of London. This twisted murder mystery mixes crime thriller elements with a pinch of the supernatural. The plot of the film kicks off when a series of rich men are found murdered, and Scotland Yard's investigation leads them to a home for the blind. Now, the evidence suggests that the killers may be sightless themselves, but then a young woman named Nora Ward begins suspecting that there might be a person with sight who is actually masterminding the entire operation. And it is this revelation that puts her life in grave danger. Dead Eyes of London is a brisk and entertaining ride filled with flair. It has an unsettling feel to it, while featuring creepy set pieces like body disposal chutes and a simian-like blind killer who's a genuinely memorable villain. There's even an appearance from a young Klaus Kinski in the film, whose addition adds to the film's eccentric energy. While the mystery is quite convoluted in a classic B-movie way, it is rather the film's mood and bizarre characters that make it a standout, which overall makes Dead Eyes of London an absolutely worthy film for a rewatch from the krimi genre. The Whip and the Body, 1963. Another Mario Bava film in the list, with this one titled The Whip and the Body. This 1963 movie is a gothic horror film that digs deeper into themes like sadomasochism, lust, and psychological torment. The story follows a disgraced nobleman named Kurt Menliff, played with chilling authority by Christopher Lee, who returns to his family's castle after being ostracized for driving a servant girl to suicide. Now he immediately resumes his twisted, passionate relationship with his former fiancée, Nevenka, who is now married to his brother. This dynamic of theirs is defined by a violent, sadomasochistic attraction between the two, which is filmed to showcase a kind of sensual beauty. But when Kurt is found murdered, a question that looms around would be whether his ghost is truly returning to haunt the inhabitants, or whether Nevenka's psychosexual obsession, which now makes her feel guilty, is being manifested as a part of her delusion. Here's where Bava's visual style comes into play, as he uses dramatic color and lighting, along with haunting compositions, to create a world that feels dreamy, as well as decadent. But this film was so controversial for its time that Italian censors even pulled it from theaters. And the film had its international cuts heavily edited, often under more moderate titles like Night is the Phantom. But what remains is still psychologically puzzling enough to offer a genuine horror stemming from nothing but the damaged psyches of the characters. Onibaba, 1964. This Kaneto Shindo directed 1964 classic is a brutal Japanese ghost story set in the harsh, war-torn landscape of 14th century Japan. We're talking about none other than Onibaba. This film follows a mother and her daughter-in-law who survive by murdering wounded, passing samurai and selling their armor and weapons. This desperation for the sake of their lives gets thrown into chaos when a neighbor, Hachi, returns from the war and reveals that the woman's son has been killed. Now the daughter-in-law, consumed by lust and a desire for escape, begins a passionate affair with Hachi. Fearing abandonment and starvation, the possessive mother devises a sinister plan to scare them apart. She uses a horrifying demon mask stolen from a slain samurai and pretends to be a vengeful spirit. A film with such a premise is bound to be a masterpiece, and it really is. Along with being as erotic as it is eerie, the black and white cinematography is gorgeous, as are the shots that capture the swaying Suzuki grass fields that make you feel their presence. Onibaba is notable for its depiction of sexuality and nudity, which serve to cause the primal drives of hunger and lust that progress the characters' lives. The haunting sounds of the wind rushing through the grass help build a sense of dread when watching. And then there's the amazing finale, which is shocking and deeply disturbing, and would surely leave the viewers with a powerful and rather unsettling image that feels like a nightmare. The Long Hair of Death, 1964. The Long Hair of Death is a classic Italian Gothic horror directed by Antonio Margheriti that delivers a great tale of witchcraft, betrayal, and revenge, all of which are elevated by the iconic presence of Barbara Steele. The film's story is set in a 15th century feudal village plagued by superstition, as the story begins with the unjust execution of Adele Karnstein, who is burned at the stake as a witch after she rejects the sexual advances of the corrupt Count Humboldt. Even when her beautiful daughter, Helen, confronts the Count, he murders her as well. But years later, Adele's younger daughter, Elizabeth, is forced to marry the Count's son. Now, as a deadly plague sweeps the land, a mysterious woman named Mary, who bears a striking resemblance to the murdered Helen, arrives at the castle, shocking everybody. The film features all the essential Gothic ingredients, like a haunted castle, a spirit seeking vengeance, a curse, while set over a backdrop of cruel nobility and peasant suffering, all of which make The Long Hair of Death a must-see. Along with that, the constant sense of wariness and doom greatly contributes to creating a thrilling experience. The supernatural elements for the film are also very well grounded in the very human sins of lust, power, and injustice, which makes the retribution at the end feel both chilling and satisfying. The Skull, 1965. Directed by Freddie Francis, The Skull is a British horror film that has a cast led by the formidable pairing of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Now the story follows Dr. Christopher Maitland, played by Cushing, who is a collector of occult artifacts, and he becomes obsessed with acquiring a unique and cursed item, which is the skull of the infamous Marquis de Sade. He obtains it from a shady dealer, but he is unaware that his friend and fellow collector, Sir Matthew Phillips, played by Lee, has already rid himself of the object out of its terrifying influence. The film's strength lies in its slow descent into madness, as we see Maitland take possession of the skull, and he is soon plagued by horrific hallucinations and nightmares. It is masterfully directed by Francis, with surreal camera work on display. Peter Cushing delivers a compelling performance as a rational man, whose curiosity and obsession leads him to a point of psychological breakdown. Now, the film is scored by avant-garde composer Elizabeth Lutyens, whose eerie music sounded perfect to complement the growing sense of dread as the story progressed. We'd recommend watching The Skull purely for its fantastic story and how a simple object with a dark history can become a channel for pure evil, especially for the one in possession of it. Planet of the Vampires, 1965. Mario Bava once again demonstrates his directorial genius with this 1965 film titled Planet of the Vampires. This one is a science fiction horror story, fused with a retro-futuristic space adventure. The plot follows the crew of two spaceships called the Argos and the Galliot, which crash land on a forbidding fog-shrouded planet after responding to a mysterious distress signal. The survivors soon realize that they are not alone there. The planet's disembodied alien inhabitants begin to possess the bodies of the crew members who died in the crash and use the revived corpses to stalk and kill the remaining survivors. Now, this film, in spite of a micro budget, managed to create a visually stunning and immersive alien world. Bava uses ingenious practical effects to bring the planet Aura to life and make it seem like a landscape that feels otherworldly and deeply haunting. Additionally, the concept of body-snatching aliens, along with the claustrophobic tension between the crew members, created a blueprint for numerous future films. Most notably, it served as a direct inspiration for the Ridley Scott classic film Alien. The film is a masterclass in visual storytelling, as well as being groundbreaking with a genre-bending story like this, and it demands a rewatch from you. Kill Baby Kill, 1966. Mario Bava's Kill Baby Kill is another addition to the list from his illustrious career. This film is almost like a fever dream of a ghost story, with many considering it a quintessential example of Italian Gothic horror. The story is set in a cursed European village at the turn of the 20th century, as the plot follows a coroner who arrives to investigate a series of mysterious deaths. He soon discovers that the whole community is living in terror, mainly due to feeling haunted by the ghost of a young girl in a white dress named Melissa, who is responsible for the gruesome deaths. The villagers are trapped by a dark secret related to the child's death, and her ghostly presence demands a bloody toll. Now, this film takes a standard ghost story and elevates it into a surreal experience for the viewer, especially with Bava's unparalleled usage of symbolism. The village feels entirely artificial, like a stage play, and that funnily helps enhance its uncanny quality. Bava even fills the film with symbolic imagery that felt dizzying at times. Some of his instances of this were a doppelganger seen in a window, then a seemingly endless spiral staircase, and not to forget the haunting, bouncing ball that signals Melissa's presence. This underappreciated film draws inspiration from Hammer horror, but brings its own distinct psychedelic madness, which makes it a visual masterpiece from beginning to end. The Plague of the Zombies, 1966. The Plague of the Zombies, by John Gilling, is a socially conscious horror film that uses the zombie mythos to explore themes of class conflict and labor exploitation. This experimental venture within the horror genre was produced by Hammer Films. It is set in a 19th century Cornish village, and the story follows a doctor who investigates a mysterious plague killing the local tin miners. He soon discovers that the village squire, who is a wealthy landowner, is using voodoo to resurrect the dead miners as nothing more than a mindless zombie workforce to operate his private, profitable mine. The film really excels with its treatment of zombie resurrection as a supernatural extension of a real-time issue like economic abuse. The undead are not monsters in this case, and represent the literal continuation of worker exploitation even after death. This brings a more humanistic angle to a horror story like this, with a light shed over real social tensions between the aristocracy and their treatment of the working class. Societal issues like the corruption of authority figures, including a complicit local doctor, also bring about a sense of betrayal that allows a kind of urgency with the horror. The visual design of the film stands out as exceptional for its time, as it features some of the most effective and grotesque zombie makeup of the 1960s. Even the iconic shot of the zombies rising from their graves in a foggy cemetery is terrifying, and it makes The Plague of the Zombies a relevant flick, as well as an all-time classic. The Torture Chamber of Dr. Sadism, 1967. This German-Italian co-production, which is loosely based on Edgar Allan Poe's short story called The Pit and the Pendulum, is the very definition of a film that prioritizes style over substance, but it's exactly this style that has glamorized the whole movie. This film from 1967, titled The Torture Chamber of Dr. Sadism, is an over-the-top gothic spectacle. The story revolves around Count Regula, the sadistic nobleman, played by none other than Christopher Lee, who gets executed for murdering 12 virgins in an attempt to gain immortality. But decades later, he rises from the grave to take revenge on the descendants of his executioners and complete his diabolical quest. Now, the premise may seem interesting, but if you are looking for a deep narrative, you won't find it here. But the film is truly a visual feast for fans of gothic atmosphere. Director Harold Reinl creates a nightmarish world filled with foggy forests of hanging corpses, crumbling castles, and torture chambers that feel straight out of a classic horror pulp novel. Even the film's set pieces feel atmospheric and have a surreal quality to them. And while the plot is rather thin, it allows some room for the film to act as a perfect canvas to show the more theatrical side of 1960s European horror. The House That Screamed, 1969. This one's a hidden gem, and almost like a precursor to the slasher genre. We're talking about The House That Screamed. It's a 1969 Spanish horror film, set in a strict remote boarding school, mainly of stubborn girls in 19th century France. The story follows the oppressive rule of the headmistress, called Signora Forno, as she attempts to reform her students. The whole atmosphere of sexual repression and cruelty is shattered when the girls begin to disappear one by one under mysterious circumstances. Now this film is praised for its incredibly gothic setting and stylish direction. Director Narciso Ibáñez Serrador creates a slow-burning, suspenseful mystery that is filled with dark, concerning themes like torture, murder, and hidden secrets within the school's walls. This claustrophobic tension and exploration of a killer stalking the students in a secluded location clearly seems to have influenced the horror films released later, like Suspiria and Pieces. The House That Screamed also has some brilliant camera work that builds a sense of constant, unseen dread in ways that may draw comparisons to the techniques of Hitchcock. For fans of classic Euro horror, it is a must-see, mainly for such an important place the film holds in the evolution of the slasher genre. Fear No More, 1961. Fear No More is a thrilling B-movie that almost feels like a lost episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. This Bernard Wiesen-directed film from 1961 stars Mala Powers as a secretary who, while on a train journey, finds a dead woman in her compartment. Before she can report it, the body vanishes, and she finds herself accused of murder. Plunged into a series of complications that feel like nightmares to her, she must find the truth while being pursued by both the police and the real killers. The film does a great job with its dizzying plot twists, and while the premise here may sound outlandish, the strong and convincing performance delivered by Mala Powers grounds the story and makes the audience invest in her desperate plight. This low-budget noir makes even the audience feel the claustrophobic tension that collapses the protagonist's world. And for viewers who enjoy classic psychological thrillers with a female protagonist caught in a web of deception, well, what better recommendation for a 60s classic than Fear No More? The Embalmer, 1965. The Embalmer is a macabre European thriller that adds a creepy layer to the usual genre-blending films, as it sits somewhere between a German krimi and an Italian giallo. This one set in the beautiful city of Venice, as the film follows a crazy killer who stalks beautiful women through the canals. His methods are what make him so particularly disturbing, as we see him drag his victims to his underground lair, murder them, then expertly embalm their bodies and stuff them to add to his growing collection of perfect women. This film is well known for the kinds of twists it has played on established horror tropes, with one of the most famous ones featuring a scuba diving killer, which is something totally bizarre as well as unfamiliar. Along with that, the Venetian setting provides a gorgeous backdrop, yet feels sinister for the murders. However, the viewer should be prepared for the film's amateur qualities, which include a slow middle section filled with travelogue-like scenes and scenes with particularly poor dubbing. Overall, while this interesting premise and macabre imagery will sound appealing to fans of cult Euro horror, its pacing and execution tend to cater to those interested in the stylistic evolution that the genre would move towards, as seen in the classic giallo films of the 1970s. Marvelous verdict. And that's our video for today. We hope our list of 22 classic ghost stories from the 1960s proves helpful for your watch list and gets you to watch these legendary movies from an era that keeps on influencing the horror genre, even to this day and age, and especially the kind of horror that's produced in contemporary cinema, one that suggests a wave of fresh revival of the whole genre altogether. Now, as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and let us know your favorite horror films from the 1960s down in the comments section below. Finally, please subscribe to Marvelous Videos for more such content. Until then, take care and ciao!